In an elegant restaurant, where opulence shone and the elite feasted, a young waitress struggled to please her customers. But in an instant, her life took an unexpected turn. An arrogant millionaire sneered at her, shouting, "Get out of here, you filthy poor thing." The words cut like blades, exposing her insecurities and frustrations. She felt the sting of contempt, an echo of all the times she had been underestimated and belittled. But deep in her heart, a flame of determination began to ignite. What no one knew was that her true identity concealed extraordinary potential. In this moment of humiliation, she made a choice to transform the pain into strength and prove that a person's worth is not measured by their financial status, but by the courage to rise again. Get ready for an exciting journey of self-discovery and redemption, where appearances deceive, and true wealth comes from inner strength. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, sign up and share your opinion. It was just another night at the Blue Moon Diner, the kind of night when the clock seemed to tick slower, and the air was filled with the familiar aroma of fresh coffee and sweet pies. The diner was a small, beloved spot in town, a refuge for those wanting to escape the cold or simply rest their feet. People came and went, all greeted with a smile and attentive service from Lola, the waitress who, although exhausted, kept a sparkle in her eye and a friendly smile on her face. Lola was a determined young woman, known by her colleagues and customers for her patience and her ability to stay calm, even on the busiest nights. That night, however, seemed particularly chaotic. There was something in the air, a mix of loud voices and muffled laughter. Lola busied herself serving tables, balancing full trays, and delivering orders with the precision of someone who knew every detail of that place. She had been working at the Blue Moon for years, and as tiring as it was, that restaurant felt like a second home to her. Then, an unusual silence spread through the place. Lola noticed all eyes were turned towards the entrance of the diner. She followed the crowd's gaze and saw a man walk in. He was different from all the others who frequented the restaurant. Tall, well-dressed, with an air of superiority that didn't go unnoticed. It was Edward Davenport, a millionaire known in the city, always surrounded by luxury and extravagant parties. The kind of person who clearly didn't usually visit places like the Blue Moon Diner. Edward entered without showing any interest in his surroundings. He walked over to a booth by the window and sat down with an air of boredom, observing the place as if it were just another one of his properties. His eyes swept over the diner, but stopped coldly on the worn tables and simple decor, revealing his clear disdain for anything that didn't meet his luxurious standards. To him, that place was merely a temporary stop, a pause before returning to his life of indulgence. Lola took a deep breath and walked over to his table. As much as she knew who he was, she decided to treat him like any other customer, with the same kindness she always showed. As she approached, she put on her best smile and politely asked, "Good evening. What can I get for you, sir?" Edward barely glanced up. "Just a coffee," he murmured, not even making an effort to hide the disdain in his voice. His darkened eyes quickly scanned Lola's worn uniform, and he wrinkled his nose in visible disgust. To him, she was just a waitress, someone he would never see beyond that simple role. Lola, despite feeling a bit uncomfortable with his attitude, kept her composure and turned to fetch the order. On her way back, while carrying the steaming cup of coffee, two teenagers running distractedly bumped into her. The cup tilted, and before she could react, the coffee spilled onto her apron. The hot liquid stained the fabric, but for Lola, it was just another common setback in her daily routine. However, Edward didn't seem to think the same. He watched the scene with a face twisted in disgust. "Can't you do anything right?" he exclaimed, his voice echoing through the diner. "Typical. Get away from me, you filthy beggar." His words cut through the diner's silence like a knife, and a muffled laugh swept through the room. Lola felt her face flush, but she stood her ground. The humiliation was palpable, but she refused to let that man see her falter. Instead, she took a deep breath, held his gaze for a brief moment, and stepped back with the dignity of someone who knows their worth, even when others cannot see it. That night, as she tidied up the diner after her shift, Edward's words still echoed in her mind. Every phrase, every disdainful glance, every silent laugh. The humiliation he had caused her felt etched in her memory, but instead of letting it discourage her, it motivated her to dream bigger. She wanted to show the world, and perhaps herself, that she was much more than just a waitress at the Blue Moon Diner. The days that followed that encounter were marked by a mix of emotions in Lola's mind. Despite the humiliation, she didn't allow Edward's words to define her. Instead, those words were like embers that ignited a determination she didn't even know existed. When Lola wasn't serving tables at the Blue Moon Diner, she was at home, alone, immersed in an activity that brought her peace: painting. Few people knew this, but Lola had a special gift for art. Her paintings were vibrant, intense, and full of emotion. For her, painting was more than just a hobby. It was a way to express what she felt, to create something beautiful amidst the chaos, and in a way, to reconnect with her true self. Each brushstroke carried a memory, a sigh, a desire to one day be recognized for who she truly was, and not just for the tattered apron from her job. Over time, that secret passion became her refuge. She would spend countless nights awake, creating paintings that captured her deepest emotions. In every stroke, there was the energy of someone who longed to be seen and heard. Her dedication was tireless, and each canvas became a little closer to her soul. Then, an unexpected opportunity arose. Her godfather, a respected man in the city and a lover of the arts, visited her home for a casual dinner. Upon entering, he noticed some canvases stacked in a corner and, curious, began to examine them. He was surprised by Lola's talent, and moved to see the stories and feelings reflected in each piece. "Lola, your talent is incredible," he said with an admiring smile. "These paintings deserve to be seen." Lola, initially hesitant, had never considered showing her work to anyone. The canvases were a reflection of her soul, something too intimate to expose. However, with her godfather's encouragement, a spark of courage began to grow inside her. What if there really was a place for her and her paintings beyond the little house where she lived? Her godfather made a few calls, and to her surprise, a renowned gallery in the city expressed interest in showcasing one of her pieces in an upcoming exhibition. "You don't have to reveal your name if you don't want to," he suggested. "You could use a pseudonym. Let your art speak for you." That's how the mysterious artist Belle Newt was born, an enigmatic name that reflected both the beauty of the night and the mystery Lola wished to maintain. Her paintings began to attract the attention of critics and collectors, who, amazed, wondered who this talented artist hidden in the shadows could be. Belle Newt became a name spoken of in the city's most sophisticated circles, and people eagerly awaited the reveal of the person behind such intense and profound works. Lola's transformation was remarkable. The girl who had once been seen only as the waitress at the Blue Moon had now become an enigmatic icon, admired for her art without anyone truly knowing who she was. With each new piece sold, with every comment about Belle Newt, Lola felt her world expanding, that she was finally being seen, even if it was from behind a curtain of mystery. But as the mystery surrounding Belle Newt grew, Lola knew she couldn't hide forever. The exhibitions were becoming increasingly popular, and the city was eagerly awaiting the next big reveal of the mysterious artist. After the unsettling encounter with Lola at the Blue Moon Diner, Edward Davenport hardly thought about that night. To him, a clumsy, poorly dressed waitress didn't even deserve a second thought. He continued with his life of luxury, parties, and extravagances, where everything around him shone in gold and elegance. However, as time passed, something within him seemed to be changing, although he didn't quite understand what it was. The truth was that, despite his initial disdain for Lola, her figure had etched itself into his mind in an unexpected way. There was something in her calm expression as she endured his cruel words, something that didn't fit the superficial and perfect world Edward knew. The look she gave while cleaning her apron, without demeaning herself or confronting him, showed a silent dignity and a strength of character he couldn't find within his own social circles. Unknowingly, Edward began to reflect on the kind of person he had become. For years, he had been applauded for his wealth and his ability to impress others with his riches, but deep down he felt empty. Nothing truly filled that void, no matter how many parties he threw, properties he bought, or compliments he received. One day, while driving through the city, he passed the Blue Moon Diner. He saw the bustling restaurant and the neon-lit sign, and for a moment, he imagined the hustle and bustle inside, the sound of dishes clattering, the smell of fresh coffee. It was then that he realized that this little restaurant, despite its simplicity, held a kind of life and purpose he had never experienced in his own luxurious universe. There, people were building something real, relationships, stories, memories, all the things he couldn't buy with all his fortune. These thoughts began to trouble him, surfacing in his mind at the most unexpected moments, and he found himself returning to the diner, no longer as the arrogant customer, but as a silent observer. He didn't enter but stood outside, watching Lola from a distance, serving customers with that calm and welcoming smile, as life continued to flow within the place. For the first time, he realized that what truly attracted him was that simplicity and authenticity, something his own world of luxury had never offered him. Driven by this new perception, Edward began to observe more of the world around him, beyond the extravagant dinners and luxurious parties. He noticed the people he used to ignore, the acts of kindness that went unnoticed, the smiles he once took for granted. Slowly, he realized there was much to learn about the true wealth of life, one that wasn't in possessing, but in valuing what is priceless. This newfound and growing humility within him brought a type of peace he hadn't felt in years. However, he knew that his learning was still in its infancy. Deep down, he felt a desire to make amends with Lola, to find a way to apologize. But at the same time, he knew that mere words wouldn't suffice. He would need to prove, to himself and to her, that he had changed. The spilled coffee on Lola's apron seemed like just a small accident that night at the Blue Moon Diner. But it ended up being the starting point for a profound transformation. Although Edward's cruel words had wounded her pride, they also awakened in Lola something she hadn't even known she possessed. A determination to rise above, to show the world, and herself, that she was so much more than the silent waitress behind the counter. Lola didn't come from a wealthy family, nor had she had many opportunities in life. Her job at the restaurant was, until then, the only way to sustain her dreams and her secret passion, art. In the few moments she could steal between shifts, Lola would draw on napkins, on loose sheets of paper, and sometimes, when night fell and the restaurant closed, she would take out her paints and lose herself in colors and shapes, transforming her emotions into true works of art. Painting was where she found peace, and a greater sense of purpose in life. Over time, her skill grew, and her paintings began to reflect a depth and beauty that touched those who saw them. She depicted everyday scenes, like a shy child's smile, the wrinkles of an elderly person who held stories, simple real things, but through her art, they gained a special magic. Lola wasn't quite sure if she was ready to show her works to the world, but an impulse within her cried out to move forward. Then, an unexpected opportunity arose. A charity gala organized by the city's high society, an event that would bring together big names, including Edward Davenport. But Lola had no invitation. She wasn't someone with connections among the elite. Yet it seemed fate had its own plans. Lola's godfather, a simple man who had helped many people throughout his life, was respected for his social work and, as a form of recognition, received a special invitation to the gala. An invitation he offered to Lola without a second thought. "This is your chance to show who you truly are, my girl," he said, beaming with pride. On the night of the gala, Lola donned an elegant black dress, something different from her waitress uniform, and styled her hair simply but delicately. She didn't want to appear extravagant, as she wished for her works to speak for her. Arriving at the event, eyes turned to her, not only because of her understated presence, but also because of the confidence she radiated. Few imagined that this young woman was the mysterious artist responsible for one of the most anticipated paintings of the night. The peak of the gala arrived, and Lola's painting, hidden until then by a veil, was revealed to the public. The piece depicted a simple yet powerful scene. A waitress serving coffee to an indifferent figure, a customer whose disdainful expression seemed to underestimate the strength and beauty of the character before him. The image captured not just a moment, but also a profound feeling of resilience and dignity. The hall, once noisy, fell silent as guests absorbed the intensity of that scene. Edward, among them, was completely taken aback, his eyes wide with surprise. He recognized, in an instant, the meaning of that painting and knew it was Lola standing there, receiving the applause that echoed through the hall. Edward Davenport's cruel remark at the Blue Moon Diner could have crushed anyone's spirit. In that moment, when the coffee stained her apron and mocking laughter echoed through the restaurant, Lola felt the heat of shame rise to her face. But instead of succumbing to despair, something ignited within her. The humiliation transformed into a type of strength that she didn't even know she possessed. She decided she wouldn't let that moment define who she was. With each laugh, each disdainful glance, she found a new reason to prove she was capable of so much more. In the days that followed, as she served tables at the Blue Moon Diner, Lola began to channel her anger and frustration into action. After each tiring shift, she dedicated hours to her art, as if every brushstroke were a way to release those pent-up emotions. Her paintings, once timid and soft, began to take on a new vigor, almost fierce, with bolder strokes and vibrant colors. The eyes of the figures she painted now displayed the strength and resilience she was discovering within herself. With each finished painting, Lola felt she was one step closer to showing the world her true potential. Her life would no longer be limited to serving tables, taking hasty orders, and enduring disdainful comments. She refused to accept that humiliating moment would be the highlight of her story. Instead, she transformed that incident into a kind of powerful fuel that motivated her to keep going, even when things seemed impossible. Over time, her confidence grew just as much as her artistic skill. She began studying techniques and styles, expanding her knowledge, and experimenting with new methods, always in search of ways to improve her art. Lola understood that each brushstroke was, in a way, a silent response to the disdain she had suffered. Each completed piece was proof to herself that she could indeed be someone of value. Even in moments when exhaustion threatened to take over, Lola remembered Edward's words, and that was all she needed to keep going. She decided that if she ever encountered him again, he would see a woman completely different from the waitress he had humiliated. Finally, the night of the grand gala event had arrived, and Edward Davenport's estate sparkled under a starry sky. For months, the town had been buzzing about the party, eager to find out which personalities would be present and what surprises awaited the guests. However, the biggest revelation of the night would not come from the hosts or the stunning luxury, but from someone few expected to see among the elite, Lola Bell. As Lola crossed the imposing doors of the mansion, her heart raced. In an elegant dress, and with a subtle smile, she looked like a new version of herself, far removed from the young waitress of the Blue Moon Diner. But she knew she was still the same Lola, guided by her strength and determination. As she walked through the main hall, she felt glances of admiration and surprise. After all, no one knew who she really was or where she came from. They only noticed her captivating presence. In the midst of the crowd, Edward Davenport, the host, mingled casually, surrounded by influential figures, laughing and exchanging pleasantries. He had no idea that the woman he had humiliated was there, about to reveal something that would completely change everyone's perception of her, and of him. The night continued with soft music, laughter, and a growing anticipation for the most awaited moment, the unveiling of a new piece of art donated by a mysterious artist, whose identity no one knew. As the guests gathered around the covered piece, Edward stepped forward to begin his presentation speech, smiling and raising his voice to capture everyone's attention. The artwork promised to be the highlight of the evening, something that symbolized luxury, exclusivity, and the very essence of elegance he cherished. When the curtain was pulled back, there was a stunning silence. On the canvas, a deep and intense piece captured the beauty of perseverance and pain, with colors and strokes that touched the hearts of everyone present. The details were powerful, evoking feelings of struggle, resilience, and triumph over adversity. In the corner of the painting, just one artist's name, Bell. Everyone was curious to find out who the talented artist was. And then, with a smooth and determined motion, Lola stepped forward. All eyes turned to her, and the air was thick with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. Edward, seeing her, stood still, instantly recognizing the young woman he had underestimated at the Blue Moon Diner. His face became a blend of disbelief and discomfort, as if reality had struck him right there, in front of everyone. Lola held her gaze steady and calm, radiating a quiet confidence. With just a few words, she thanked the opportunity to showcase her art, and mentioned how each brushstroke carried a piece of her story, her struggle, and her victories. The people around her began to murmur with admiration, and Edward's discomfort visibly grew. At that moment, it was not just an artistic revelation, it was a living lesson, a testament that true greatness did not come from status or money, but from the strength of character and persistence. That night would mark an unexpected turning point in Lola's life. The unveiling of her artwork at Edward Davenport's gala was not just a moment of admiration. It was a true awakening for everyone present, especially for Edward. The woman he had once belittled, whom he hadn't even considered worthy of his gaze, was now there, celebrated by all and seen as a talented and mysterious artist. Shortly after the presentation, Lola was surrounded by some of the city's most influential guests. Businesspeople, art critics, and even collectors approached her, enchanted, asking questions about her creative process and the emotions her painting evoked. They wanted to know more about the belle behind that touching work, and every word she shared only deepened the fascination of those present. Little by little, Lola found herself welcomed in a way she had never imagined. Invitations to exhibitions, dinners, and events began to surface, invites that had previously seemed so far from her reality. The sophisticated world she had only glimpsed from afar now appeared to open its doors to her. Yet at the same time, Lola kept her feet firmly on the ground, remembering every battle faced, every tear hidden behind the counter of the Blue Moon Diner. Amid the glamour surrounding her, she never stopped being that determined young woman who used hardships as stepping stones for her own growth. The highlight of the evening came when, in an unexpected gesture, Edward Davenport approached her, with a look entirely different from their first encounter. He extended his hand, and his expression held a mix of humility and recognition. "Lola," he said hesitantly but sincerely, "I was wrong about you. I judged you superficially, and now I realize I have so much to learn. Your art, your story. This is something I will never forget." Lola accepted Edward's hand with a serene smile. For her, this was more than just an apology. It was a silent victory, proof that her strength and dignity had transformed prejudice into acknowledgement. With a steady gaze and a lightness in her voice, she replied, "Thank you, Edward. We all have our struggles, and perhaps our stories crossed for a reason." Around them, the guests watched the scene with admiration. In that moment, they were not just witnessing a talented emerging artist, but a story of overcoming and humility that touched everyone. People saw in Lola's journey a glimmer of hope, a reminder that a person's worth isn't in appearances or positions, but in their essence. And so, on that unforgettable night, Lola Belle ceased to be just a waitress from the Blue Moon Diner, and became a living inspiration, someone who had transformed prejudice into respect, offense into motivation, and suffering into art. Lola's journey was now known, and she moved forward, ready to conquer new horizons. In the week following the event, Edward Davenport couldn't stop thinking about Lola, and the unexpected depth that her art revealed. He remembered every brushstroke of that piece, so simple yet so intense, reflecting a life filled with challenges, triumphs, and above all resilience. In a moment of reflection, Edward found himself walking through the gallery where Lola's work had been displayed, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the space. It felt as though something greater was pulling him to revisit that experience, perhaps even seeking to understand why it affected him so deeply. Edward was not a man given to introspection. From an early age, he had grown accustomed to success, and viewed himself as an unshakable figure, above the problems that troubled ordinary people. Yet somehow, Lola's journey had dismantled that armor, allowing him to see himself in a new light. For the first time, the weight of his own pride felt evident and suffocating. He stopped in front of Lola's painting, now hung in the central wall of the gallery, and noticed something he hadn't seen before. Tiny cracks in the paint, as if the piece had been worn down by time and struggle. He understood that those marks were more than artistic techniques. They were metaphors for all the invisible scars that Lola carried, which he had, until that moment, ignored. This made him remember every moment he had treated her with disdain, judging her as insignificant. From that point on, Edward began to visit the gallery regularly, as if seeking answers and finding relief in being surrounded by the raw truth of Lola's work. Days passed, and each time he returned, he felt his own ego diminish, as if the walls of pride he had built around himself were slowly crumbling. He realized that humility wasn't a virtue to be earned, but an essence to be discovered. And that essence was right there, revealed in the work of a young woman who, despite being rejected and humiliated, knew how to transform her pain into something beautiful and inspiring. One day, Edward made a decision that changed the course of his life. Inspired by Lola's courage and determined to show that he could change too, he organized a charity event at the gallery, aimed at supporting emerging artists who, like her, sought space and recognition. For him, it was a form of redemption, an opportunity to reconnect with a part of himself that had long been lost amidst pride and status. On the night of the event, as he watched young artists present their work, Edward finally felt free. He realized that true greatness didn't lie in who he was in the eyes of others, but in how he could inspire and help those around him, especially those who, like Lola, carried intense, real, and impactful stories. At the end of the night, Edward approached Lola, who was also present as a special guest. He smiled, with a sparkle in his eyes that mixed gratitude with sincere regret. "Lola," he said, his voice soft and his hands slightly trembling, "you've taught me more about life and about myself than any fortune could." "Thank you." Lola smiled, embodying the serenity of someone who knew her own journey and the strength she carried. There, in the gallery where their stories finally intertwined, Edward and Lola understood that, in every act of humility, regret, and redemption, there lay a new chance to begin again. As the charity gala unfolded beneath the glimmering chandeliers, Edward Davenport found himself amidst a sea of fake smiles and shallow conversations. He was surrounded by men and women in designer outfits, discussing their latest art acquisitions and vacations in exotic destinations. But contrary to how he usually felt, this time everything seemed empty. He observed the faces, but saw no genuine happiness that he had imagined such a lifestyle would bring. Instead, he felt a growing disillusionment as he realized that the laughter sounded more like echoes of loneliness than expressions of joy. As he reflected, his gaze drifted to the table where Lola sat. Dressed in an elegant black dress that contrasted with her vibrant essence, she animatedly chatted with other artists. The sparkle in her eyes was palpable, and her laughter, authentic and warm, lit up the room. Edward noticed how people gravitated toward her, drawn by her energy, and by something he barely understood at the time. A true wealth that couldn't be bought with money. Lola wasn't just an artist. She was a source of inspiration and hope. During the gala, she shared stories of overcoming challenges. Moments when life challenged her to rise and shine, even when circumstances seemed bleak. Edward was captivated as he listened to how she transformed her struggles into art, a visceral expression that touched the hearts of those who witnessed it. It was a reminder that each of her brushstrokes contained the essence of life, with all its complexities and nuances. In a moment of clarity, Edward realized he had lost himself in his relentless pursuit of validation and status. That gala, which should have been a symbol of success, merely reflected his own empty quest. The people there didn't truly see each other. They didn't connect. He recalled his previous life, the lavish parties, and the nights when he surrounded himself with people who valued him only for what he had, not for who he was. It was a lonely luxury. The conversation between Lola and the other artists became a focal point in his mind. They spoke about the importance of authenticity, of art that transcends the ego and connects humans on a deeper level. With each word, Edward felt the walls of his pride beginning to crumble, making way for a new understanding of what truly mattered in life. Then, in an unexpected moment, Lola challenged everyone present. "How about we exchange stories of our lives instead of just talking about our possessions? What truly defines us are the experiences we live, the lessons we learn, and how we touch each other's lives." Edward was taken aback. It was so simple, so true, that he could hardly believe he hadn't thought of it before. It was as if, for a brief moment, the gala had transformed into a sacred space of vulnerability and connection. As the conversations began to flow more honestly and openly, Edward felt his perspective shift. He no longer wanted to be just an arrogant millionaire. He wanted to be someone who valued the essence of being human. He stood up and joined Lola and the others, feeling lighter and more authentic. In sharing his own story, he revealed the insecurities he had kept hidden for so long, surprising everyone with his vulnerability. Lola, hearing his words, smiled warmly, knowing that connection was forming. There, amid laughter and tears, they discovered a new meaning of wealth. A life rich in stories, experiences, and true love. It was a wealth not found in bank accounts, but in the memories created and the relationships nurtured. In that atmosphere, Edward realized that, by looking beyond appearances and the superficiality of money, he was rebuilding himself, not as a man seeking status, but as someone who finally recognized the value of human connections. And this internal transformation began to shape not only his life, but also how he viewed the world around him. But this journey was far from over. Edward knew there was much more to discover about himself, and what it meant to live fully. With renewed determination, he prepared for a new chapter that promised to reveal even more about life, and the bonds that truly mattered. And the connection with Lola was just beginning to deepen, intertwining their stories in ways they had never imagined. In the elegant museum hall, illuminated by sparkling chandeliers, and filled with masterpieces, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Edward Davenport, still on his journey of transformation, was surrounded by influential people, but his mind was far from the discussions of money and status that once fascinated him. Instead, he found himself drawn to a presence that radiated a unique energy, Lola. She moved through the space with innate grace, her posture impeccable, and a smile that lit up not only her face, but the entire environment around her. The way she interacted with others, listening intently to their stories, and the way her eyes sparkled as she shared her own experiences, exemplified what dignity meant. As Edward watched her, a small voice in his head whispered that here was someone truly rich, even if she didn't have overflowing bank accounts. An unexpected conversation unfolded between them as Lola, noticing Edward's thoughtful gaze, approached him with a gentle smile. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, her curiosity genuine. Edward hesitated, but felt the urge to share. "Sometimes I feel like all of this is so empty. The people here seem so concerned with what they have instead of who they really are." Lola nodded, understanding his frustration. It's easy to get lost in this game of appearances. But true class comes from within. It's about how we treat others and the respect we have for ourselves. Her words resonated in his heart, reminding Edward of moments in his life when he let his ego take precedence, diminishing the people around him. Then, in a gesture that surprised him, Lola shared a personal story. She spoke about a time when she was challenged to maintain her dignity, even when faced with the disdain of people who only saw her as a waitress. "At first, I let myself be affected by mean comments and scornful looks. But one day, I realized that true wealth lies in how we feel about ourselves. I started to see myself not for what I did, but for who I was. That gave me strength." Edward watched her with growing admiration. He realized that although his life was filled with material possessions, he had never felt such a deep and authentic connection with anyone. What truly mattered was not what she had, but who she was, a woman of courage, class, and dignity. With every word, Lola left an indelible mark on his heart, challenging him to reconsider his own priorities and values. As the night progressed, Edward had the chance to see Lola in action. She approached a group of guests, all laughing and having a good time, and with a touch of humor and elegance, she brought forth a conversation about how art could be a means to unite people, regardless of their backgrounds or status. The way she spoke, captivating everyone with her authenticity and passion, was a testament that a person's value is not determined by material possessions, but by the richness they carry within themselves. Edward realized that every gesture she made, every word, and every smile held a weight that was far more meaningful than any wealth he could accumulate. He was learning that true class was not just about manners or appearance, but about how one treated others, the forgiveness one offered, and the ability to see the best in people. In that moment, he felt a wave of gratitude for having met Lola, a true teacher of life. It was as if she were revealing to him a new horizon, a path leading to a world richer in experiences and human relationships. He wanted to be part of that, to be part of something that transcended the material. As the night drew to a close and people began to disperse, Edward approached Lola, his eyes reflecting a new determination. "Thank you for showing me what really matters," he said, feeling lighter than ever. "I want to be a better person. I want to learn how to live with dignity and humility." She smiled, a smile full of encouragement and hope. "It's a journey we can all embark on, Edward. The important thing is to be open to learning and growing." And so, beneath the stars, a new friendship began to form, filled with promises and lessons. Edward knew this connection would change his life forever, but the journey was just beginning. As the reality of his transformations approached, the anticipation of what was to come enveloped him in a wave of hope. A new understanding of true wealth was starting to blossom within him, and he was ready to embrace that change. At the end of this journey, it becomes clear that the true essence of a person goes far beyond their appearance or financial situation. Lola's transformation teaches us that every challenge can be an opportunity for growth, and that dignity and humility are the greatest riches we can cultivate. Her experiences remind us that respect and empathy are fundamental in a world that is often superficial, and that everyone has a valuable story to tell. If you were touched by this story of resilience and self-discovery, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Join us for more inspiring narratives that celebrate the strength of the human spirit and encourage us to see what really matters in life. Share your thoughts in the comments and be part of this community that believes in the power of transformation.